A barefoot boy rescued a millionaire from a collapsed church, then vanished into the storm without a name. Weeks later, the millionaire set out, not to repay a debt, but to find the boy who reminded him how to live again. The warehouse didn't creak like houses did. It breathed, metal expanding and contracting in the cold, shadows stretching and shrinking with the light. To Lucas Reyes, it was the only place left that didn't ask anything of him. No locks, no voices, no questions. At 9 years old, Lucas had become skilled at being invisible. He knew how to walk without echo, how to hide under pallets, how to eat without making sound. He'd learned it the hard way, through bruises, silence, and doors that slammed louder than thunder. He woke before sunrise, tucked deep in the far corner behind broken crates. The ticking in his pocket greeted him like a pulse. Lucas reached for it, a rusted pocket watch, glass cracked down the center, hands slightly off alignment, but still moving. He pressed it to his chest. It was his father's, or had been. The fire had taken almost everything: the car, the laughter, the songs his mother hummed through cracked lips when folding laundry. But the watch had survived. So had Lucas. He didn't know if that was a blessing or a punishment. Every morning, he wound it, slowly, carefully. He had no one left to speak to, but the watch made him feel less alone. Time still ticked. That meant something, didn't it? He crawled out from under the blankets, really just a stack of old coats, and slipped out the side door. The alley behind Rosa's diner smelled like coffee grounds and burnt toast. Sometimes, if she'd had a quiet night, Rosa would leave food near the trash bin: half a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a hard-boiled egg in foil, a note that simply read, "Eat." Rosa never called his name, never made him feel like a stray. She just left kindness where it could be found. Today, there was nothing. So Lucas kept walking, hands shoved into his thin hoodie, shoes long lost to rain and rot. The sidewalk stung his soles, but he didn't flinch. You got used to pain if you had to, and he had to. He passed the front of the library and circled to the side entrance. Mr. Jenkins, the retired guard, always left the staff door cracked open by accident, or maybe on purpose. Lucas liked to think it was on purpose. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and lemon oil. Safe smells. Still smells. He curled into the usual chair by the window and pulled out a battered copy of How Things Work. He'd read it a dozen times. Pages torn, corners soft, diagrams fading. Still, it held magic. Machines didn't need to be loved to function. They just needed order. Lucas liked that. His stomach growled. He ignored it. Instead, he opened the folded scrap of paper he kept hidden in the book jacket. Maddie's drawing. A crayon picture of two stick figures, one taller, one smaller, under a crooked yellow sun. She had pressed it into his palm the night he ran. "Take it," she'd mouthed, her voice locked away inside her chest, where no one could steal it. Maddie had been his shadow at Green Hollow. She was 7, silent since she'd been locked in the basement for crying during dinner. Mrs. Crowley said punishment built character. Lucas thought it built ghosts. He had begged Maddie to leave with him. She'd just shaken her head and climbed into bed, her tiny hands shaking. He left anyway. Now, sitting in the quiet library, the shame sat heavy in his chest. He'd meant to go back, to come back for her with help. But no one listened to boys with no shoes and no story anyone believed. Lucas closed the book, tucked the picture away. The watch ticked beside it. He leaned his forehead to the cool window and whispered, "I'm sorry." Outside, the wind picked up. That night, the sky turned a strange color, greenish-gray, like bruised skin. People hurried along the sidewalks, pulling kids by the hands, yanking patio chairs inside. Storm sirens blared once, then again. Lucas had seen storms before, but this one felt louder, like the sky was holding its breath. He ran back to the warehouse, slid behind the crates, curled up beneath a sheet of plywood. The wind howled. Dust flew in under the broken door. He could hear things crashing, glass, metal, voices shouting somewhere far away. Then, silence. Not the peaceful kind, the eerie kind, like the world was waiting. In that silence, a sound came, faint, muffled. A voice. "Help!" Lucas sat up, heartbeat pounding. "Is anyone—" The voice broke, distant, strangled. He crawled to the edge of the wall and peered out. Across the street, the old chapel had collapsed. It used to be a shelter long before the town stopped caring about things like that. Now, it was just a husk. But someone was in there. Lucas looked behind him, as if someone else might go. But there was no one. There was never anyone. He stood. The sidewalk burned under his feet. Wind still snapped through the broken trees. The sirens had gone quiet, or maybe they'd stopped working. He crossed the road. Bricks littered the ground like spilled teeth. The roof had caved in. Part of the wall was gone. But under a heavy beam, someone moved. Lucas scrambled forward, shoving debris aside with his arms, scraping his knees on broken tile. He grabbed at a piece of plasterboard, pulled it free. Beneath it, a man. Blood trickled from his temple. His eyes were half closed. Lucas leaned close. "I'm here," he whispered. The man blinked. "Who?" Lucas didn't answer. He kept digging. 10 minutes, maybe more. Then, with one last push, he freed the man's legs. Lucas gripped his arms and dragged him to safety, under the shelter of a crumbling overhang. The man coughed. Lucas pulled the watch from his pocket and placed it in the man's palm. "Time doesn't stop," he said softly. "Even when you want it to." The man stared at the watch. Then, at him. "What's your name?" he rasped. Lucas stood. He didn't answer. He turned and ran, back into the shadows, back into silence. But something in his chest had shifted. For the first time in months, Lucas felt seen, not fixed, not safe, but seen. And in the dark, that was enough. The sirens wailed just after midnight. Not the usual ambulance cry, nor the sharp urgency of fire trucks. This one rose long and hollow, like a warning from something older than weather, the kind of sound that made the bones remember fear. Lucas woke to the noise, heart pounding, breath tight. The wind slapped against the metal siding of the warehouse like an angry hand. He sat up, blanket tangled at his feet, and crawled toward the broken panel near the far wall. Outside, the sky was a sick green, not natural, not safe. He knew this kind of sky. It looked like the air was holding its breath. Lightning forked across the distance, then again, closer. The thunder didn't crack. It rolled like something enormous waking up. Lucas felt it in his ribs. The warehouse creaked. He backed away from the wall and tucked himself under the heavy work table, dragging a rusted sheet of tin in front of the opening. The wind howled louder. He held his breath as debris slapped the roof. From somewhere beyond the metal walls, he heard a scream. He squeezed his eyes shut. Let it pass. Let it all pass. But then came the voice. Faint. Broken. "Help. Is someone—" He opened his eyes. There was a difference between fear and knowing. He had learned that long ago. Fear made you freeze. Knowing made you move. Lucas stood. He slipped through the side door into the storm. Across town, William Sterling gripped the edge of a crumbling pew, the church's rafters groaning above him. He hadn't meant to be here. His assistant had begged him not to go out alone, not tonight, not during tornado season. But William had never liked being told what to fear. He'd come to the chapel because it was the last piece of the old town left untouched by his company. The others, Main Street shops, the bookstore, the red brick schoolhouse, had all been modernized or gutted. But this chapel, with its chipped white paint and boarded windows, had resisted, like him. He walked slowly down the aisle, past the altar, past the stained glass, faded, fractured, but still upright. The air shifted. A howl rose in the distance. Trees bowed to the ground. He turned to leave. Then came the roar, not of wind, of collapse. The roof gave way before he could move. Something massive struck his shoulder. Wood cracked. Glass shattered. His breath disappeared. The world turned black. Lucas ran. His hair whipped across his face, soaked through. Branches snapped beneath his feet. He could barely see the road, but he knew where he was going. The old chapel. He'd passed it every day, sat on the steps when the library was closed, watched the way the wind carried leaves to its door, like offerings. Now it looked half destroyed. The steeple lay across the lawn. The front wall had caved in, but the voice had come from there. He was sure. He climbed over broken stone, splintered pews. Rain burned his eyes. He moved toward the sound. "Hello?" he called. "I'm here." A groan answered. Then, movement. Beneath a fallen beam, a figure. Lucas dropped to his knees and started digging. His hands stung, skin splitting at the knuckles, but he didn't stop. The man's face was pale. Blood ran down his temple. Lucas pushed harder. Wood cracked. A cloud of dust rose. The beam shifted just enough. He gripped the man's arms and dragged him clear, inch by inch, until they collapsed beneath a broken stained glass window. Rain dripped through the open roof in steady rhythm. The man stirred. His eyes opened. Lucas froze. "You..." The man tried to speak. "Are you... real?" Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the cracked watch. He placed it gently into the man's hand. The man looked down, blinking hard. His fingers closed around the watch, like it was something sacred. "Why?" he whispered. Lucas looked at him, really looked. This man, even broken and bloodied, carried a weight he recognized. Loneliness, grief, the kind that couldn't be hidden by suits or money or years. "Because time doesn't stop," Lucas said, "even when it should." The man blinked again. "What's your name?" But Lucas was already stepping back. Sirens wailed again in the distance, closer now. Headlights swept through the rain. Lucas turned and disappeared into the night. William woke hours later in a hospital bed, shoulder bandaged, ribs taped. The watch sat on the tray beside him. Staff asked questions he didn't answer. They told him he was lucky. He didn't feel lucky. He kept asking, "The boy? Where is the boy?" No one knew. He held the watch to his ear. Tick, tick, tick. Lucas returned to the warehouse, soaked and shivering, fingers raw. He didn't sleep. He sat beneath the work table, arms wrapped around his knees, the rain still dripping through holes in the roof. He'd saved someone. It didn't feel like it. It felt like he'd touched something too big, too sudden, like a prayer shouted into the wind. But when he closed his eyes, he remembered the man's face, the way he looked at the watch, not like it was a gift, like it was a mirror. Lucas whispered into the dark, not to anyone in particular. He looked lost too. Then he curled tighter into himself and waited for the world to move again. In another part of town, in a mansion few ever saw the inside of, a man sat with a cracked watch and a name he didn't yet know, but was determined to find. And somewhere between them, something had begun. Not a rescue, not a miracle, but the quiet beginning of being found. The hospital room was too white, too clean, too quiet. William Sterling stared at the ceiling tiles and thought about how nothing in life ever broke with symmetry. You could plan buildings to withstand hurricanes, design software to detect earthquakes, but you couldn't program grief. It came where it pleased. It took what it wanted. The nurse had left hours ago, or maybe minutes. He wasn't sure. He barely registered the machines around him, the IV dripping steadily, the bruise blooming across his ribs. All his focus was on the small object resting in his palm, a pocket watch, cracked glass, worn edges, still ticking. The boy had left it with him. A boy with eyes like storm clouds and hands torn bloody. A boy who should have run the other way but hadn't, who'd given him time. William closed his fingers around it. He hadn't touched his own watch in years. Not since the funeral. Not since they lowered Emily into the ground and the world made less sense. 2 days later, William left the hospital against the nurses' wishes. He ignored their protests, stepped into the rain with a stiffness he hadn't felt since his military years, and told his driver to take him to the office. He didn't go to the penthouse. He went to the archives. "Sir?" His assistant, Tommy Blake, looked confused. "Should I cancel the board meeting?" William didn't look up. "It can wait." He brushed dust off a box labeled Sterling Infrastructure, Cedar Grove Projects. Inside were blueprints, surveys, and a town map he'd memorized years ago, but never really seen. He unfolded the map and traced a finger from the old chapel to the warehouse district. "That's where he came from," William murmured. "Who?" Tommy asked, cautious. "The boy who saved me." Tommy hesitated. We don't have a name. No camera footage. Probably a runaway." William looked up, slowly. "Then find the place that keeps letting children disappear." Tommy blinked. "Sir, I want names of every orphanage, foster home, shelter, and school within 30 miles. Now." There was steel in his voice, not the boardroom steel of profits and politics. A different kind, older, quieter, the kind forged by loss. That night, William sat alone in his study. The fire hissed low in the grate, casting long shadows across the floor. He held the watch to his ear. Tick, tick, tick. A sound from the past. Emily had once fallen asleep to that ticking, curled in his lap while he read her Charlotte's Web for the 7th time. He remembered her hair smelling of apples and shampoo. Her questions, endless and brave. "Daddy, why do bad things happen to good people?" He'd paused then, unsure what to say. "Sometimes," he'd answered, "because the world forgets to look for them." Now a boy had looked for him, had dug him out of ruin, had walked away without a name. William hadn't cried since Emily. But that night, something broke. A tear fell. Just one. But it was enough. By morning, his team had compiled the list. 2 orphanages, 1 private home, 1 reform facility with a record of citations, Green Hollow. Tommy cleared his throat. "That last one, it's under private contract. They don't like visitors." William met his gaze. "Then let's not visit. Let's investigate." Tommy's jaw tightened. "Sir, if I may, this is a lot of attention for a nobody." William's eyes darkened. "That nobody saved my life." Then softer, almost to himself. "He reminded me. I still have one." Tommy looked away. At Green Hollow, Mrs. Crowley adjusted her brooch and smiled tightly into the mirror. She didn't like surprise visits, and she especially didn't like them from people with money. Children were unpredictable. Especially that girl, Maddie, still mute, still watching her with those unsettling eyes. Crowley knocked twice on the glass of the common room before entering. "Smiles, everyone. We have company." Maddie didn't move, just stared at the sketch pad in her lap, where she'd drawn a boy holding a pocket watch. William arrived with no fanfare. He didn't bring press, just Tommy, a briefcase, and a quiet presence that filled the hallway like winter air. Crowley greeted them with practiced sweetness. "Mr. Sterling, what a..." generous surprise. "I'd like a tour," he said simply. "Of course, we're proud of what we do here." But as they moved through the halls, William noticed the paint peeling near the ceilings, the locks on the toy cabinets, the way children flinched when Crowley passed. In a corner room, he saw her, Maddie, the only child not pretending. She looked up, straight at him, not afraid, just waiting. That night, William returned home in silence. He poured himself tea, but didn't drink it. He opened the sketch Tommy had taken from the donation box. A scan of Maddie's drawing. The boy was there. Stick figure, pocket watch. And next to him, a scribbled word in uneven letters. Lucas. William stared, then smiled, slow and sad. "I have your name," he whispered. He looked out the window, toward the part of town where buildings leaned with age and children vanished without notice. "I see you now." And somewhere, not far from that window, a boy dreamed of light. Green Hollow sat at the edge of Cedar Grove, like something forgotten by time. Its brick walls, painted a dull institutional beige, bore the weathered look of a place that had once been proud, but now only clung to function. Behind the barred windows, childhood rusted slowly. Maddie sat cross-legged on the floor of the common room, sketchbook open, her crayon pressed hard into the page. She was drawing again, always drawing. But this one was different. No stick-figure sunshine, no wide-eyed animals. Just a boy, small and scraped, holding a watch like it was the last piece of sky. Mrs. Crowley passed by the doorway and paused. "You're still wasting time on that silent scribbling," she said, voice syrupy with disdain. "No one's coming, Maddie. No one ever does." Maddie didn't lift her eyes. Crowley leaned in closer, her heels tapping sharp on the linoleum. "You know why they left you here, don't you?" she whispered. "Because you don't talk. Because even your parents knew you weren't worth the noise." Maddie's crayon cracked in two. Crowley smiled. Across town, Lucas stood in the shadow of a bus depot, soaked through and shivering. He hadn't meant to come back, but his feet had moved before his mind caught up. The moment he'd seen Maddie's crumpled drawing, the one he always carried, now nearly rubbed white at the folds, he knew he couldn't wait for miracles, couldn't wait for someday, not when the world was already bruising over. He stared across the lot at Green Hollow's perimeter, a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, a yard too barren for play, one crooked swing that hadn't moved in years. He had once called that place home. No, not home. Just the place before. Lucas ducked into the alley and waited for the delivery truck to pull away. He knew the schedule, remembered every blind spot. He climbed the fence like memory, and memory didn't forget pain. Inside, the hallways smelled the same, bleach and despair. He crept past the old laundry chute, the cracked tile where Mrs. Crowley once smashed a boy's toy for talking back. He moved quickly, low to the ground, until he reached the door at the end, the one with peeling paint and tape residue that used to hold up quiet zone signs. Maddie's room. She wasn't there. His heart stuttered. Then, a sound, a muffled cough, from the basement. His blood ran cold. Number He slipped down the stairs, heart hammering. The basement wasn't lit, just one dangling bulb that flickered overhead. At the far end, the storage closet door stood ajar. Lucas stepped inside. Maddie lay curled on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, lips trembling from cold or fear or both. The air smelled of mildew and iron. He knelt beside her. "It's me," he whispered. "It's Lucas." She didn't look up. Her fingers traced something invisible on the floor. "I came back," he said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I left. I shouldn't have. I should have." She reached up, touched his cheek, He closed his eyes. Later, back in the common room, Lucas handed her half a peanut butter sandwich he'd stolen from a vending machine at the depot. She ate slowly, eyes wide, not from hunger, but disbelief. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said. This time for real. She tilted her head. He took her hand. "You believe me, right?" Before she could answer, the door slammed open. Mrs. Crowley stood there, face like carved stone. "Well, well," she said, stepping inside. "The prodigal pest returns." Lucas stood. "You don't belong here anymore," she snapped. "You were thrown out for a reason." "I left," he said. She sneered. "Same thing." Crowley took a step closer, heels clicking like teeth. "You think you're some kind of hero, bringing scraps and fairy tales." She turned to Maddie. "And you? Still playing mute, are we? Still thinking silence is some kind of shield?" Lucas moved in front of Maddie. Crowley's smile dropped. "You little—" She raised her hand. But this time Lucas didn't flinch. He just looked her in the eye and said quietly, "You don't scare me anymore." Something shifted. Maybe it was the way Maddie stood, her small fingers clutching Lucas's shirt. Maybe it was the silence, no longer fearful, but firm. Mrs. Crowley hesitated. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Later that night, Lucas snuck Maddie into the old laundry room. He wrapped her in an old blanket and whispered a story, half memory, half wish, about a cabin by a lake where no one yelled and everyone had their own toothbrush. She smiled, not fully, just enough. He pulled the drawing from his pocket. "This is what kept me alive," he said. "When everything else disappeared, this reminded me I wasn't." Maddie reached into her own bag, pulled out a new picture. It was him, but older, holding her hand, and beside them, a man with grey hair and a watch in his palm. Lucas stared. "Who is that?" he asked. She pointed to the stars above the figures, then to the pocket watch, then to his chest. He didn't understand. Not yet, but he would. At sunrise, Lucas slipped away again. Not because he wanted to, because he had to find a way out, a real one, for both of them. As he walked through the alley behind the library, he didn't notice the man parked down the street in a dark sedan, watching through the windshield. William Sterling leaned forward, breath catching. The boy. Same posture, same eyes. He didn't approach. Not yet. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and held the watch, still ticking. The photo wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was blurry, captured from an old security camera outside the Cedar Grove Public Library. A still frame from a stormy morning just after the tornado had ripped through the town. But there, caught between motion blur and rain smear, was a boy, small, thin, barefoot, his head tilted downward, his shoulders drawn close like he didn't quite trust the world to hold him up. And in his hand, unmistakable even through pixelation, was a cracked pocket watch. William Sterling leaned closer to the computer screen, his fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. "That's him," he said softly. "That's the boy." Tommy Blake cleared his throat. "Could be anyone, sir. These camera feeds are from weeks ago. He might be long gone." William didn't blink. Or he might still be here. Still hiding. Tommy shifted his weight, avoiding eye contact. "You really think this kid matters?" "He matters to me," William said, his voice like cooled iron. "And that should be enough." That afternoon, William drove alone to Rosa's diner. He didn't call ahead, didn't send a driver. He just walked in, rain on his coat, silver at his temples catching the dull light of a low sun. Rosa looked up from behind the counter, eyebrows arching slightly. She was a woman who had seen too many empty promises dressed in expensive suits. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded, took a seat. "I think," William began slowly, "a boy's been coming here. Quiet, brown hair, thin, maybe 9 or 10. She didn't respond. "He helped me," he added, "saved my life," then disappeared. Rosa refilled a mug without looking up. "Kids disappear around here all the time, Mr. Sterling." "I know," he said. "That's the problem." Silence stretched between them. The diner hummed softly, old neon buzzing, plates clinking from the back. Then she reached beneath the counter and slid something toward him. A drawing, crayon on lined paper, faded from folding, a boy with a cracked watch in his palm, and beside him a girl with a closed mouth and wide, worried eyes. "He left that behind one night," Rosa said. "Didn't come in for food, just sat outside in the rain for hours, like he was waiting for someone who never showed." William held the drawing with care, like it might tear if he breathed too hard. "What's her name?" he asked. "The girl?" Rosa shrugged. "Don't know. But she's been with him before. Silent thing. Draws like him." She paused, then added, "They're not ordinary runaways. You can feel it." William nodded once. "I felt it too." That night, William sat in his study surrounded by quiet. The drawing lay on his desk, beside the photograph. Ghosts on paper. Evidence not of crime, but of loss. Of children who had vanished in plain sight. He stared at the sketch of the girl. Silent. Small. Watching everything. He thought of Emily again, his daughter. Her questions. Her fear of thunder. The way she used to grip his pinky when crossing the street. He remembered how, near the end, she had whispered, "Promise you'll still see the little ones, even when I'm gone." He hadn't kept that promise. Until now. Lucas crouched behind the post office dumpster, holding the last peanut butter bar he had. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from decision. He had to leave soon. The longer he stayed, the more danger Maddie was in. But something tugged at him. Not fear, hope. A foolish, slow-breathing kind of hope that someone out there had noticed, that the watch had meant something, that the man he'd saved remembered. He pulled Maddie's latest drawing from his coat. It was him again. But now, the figure beside him wasn't just Maddie. It was someone older, a man. She'd drawn William, and behind them, a place that looked like no place he'd ever known. Trees, sun, a house with open windows. Underneath, in shaky letters, she'd written, "It can be real." He didn't know how she knew that man mattered, but somehow, she always knew more than she said. The next morning, William returned to the library. He asked for the security footage again, this time not just the alleyway. "All angles," he told the clerk. "Back to front, 3 months' worth." It took hours, but finally, there it was. The girl, small, dark hair, silent. She was sitting beneath the window, sketchbook in hand, and across from her, an older man handing her a sandwich, not a staff member, just someone who belonged in quiet places. William paused the video. There, the man's face, lines like crow's feet, a soft kindness beneath tired eyes. He printed the still. "Who is he?" he asked the librarian. "That's Jenkins," she said. "Our night caretaker, keeps to himself, retired teacher, comes early, leaves late. Some of the kids call him Owl, never talks much." William nodded, but he smiled too. Finally, a thread. That evening, he visited Jenkins. The old man opened the door slowly, blinking behind thick glasses. "Can I help you?" William handed him the photo. Jenkins looked at it, then back at William, said nothing. "He saved me," William said simply, "and now I want to save him." Jenkins studied him for a long time, then without a word, stepped aside and let him in. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and newspapers. On the mantel sat a line of small crayon drawings, children, animals, things with hopeful eyes. William noticed a newer one, the boy again, but this time smiling. "He never gave his name," Jenkins said quietly, "but he reads like he's been here 100 years. Do you know where he is?" "Not anymore," Jenkins said, "but I think he's trying to be found." William looked up. "I want to give him a name, a place, a home." Jenkins smiled, barely. "Then stop chasing ghosts," he said. "Start listening to the ones who whisper." William Sterling stood before the rusted gate of Green Hollow, wind tugging at his coat, clouds pressing low. The building hadn't changed, still stoic, still silent. But now he saw it differently, not as an institution, as a wound, and he had come to reopen it. A woman with too bright lipstick and a pinched smile approached him, clipboard tight against her chest. "You must be Mr. Sterling," she said. "Mrs. Crowley will be thrilled." William didn't smile. "Let's not lie to each other this early in the day." She blinked. He stepped through the gate. Mrs. Crowley greeted him at the entrance with the same venom-veiled charm she had perfected over the years. Her brooch glinted under the flickering hallway light, an eagle clutching arrows. "Mr. Sterling," she purred, "to what do we owe the honor?" He offered a polite nod. "Philanthropy. I've been reviewing underfunded youth programs. Yours has come up, repeatedly." A pause. Crowley's lips twitched. "We do what we can. It's not glamorous work." "No," William said evenly. "It isn't." She gestured down the hall. "Come. Let me show you how we make miracles from government scraps." As they walked, William took in every corner, the flaking paint, the locks on the toy room, the barred windows. He noted the glances children gave her, furtive, darting, braced. And then, at the end of the hall, he saw her. Maddie, sitting alone on the floor, drawing. Crowley swept past her without pause, but William lingered. He knelt slowly. Maddie didn't look up. Instead, she held out the sketch. A man in a coat, a boy with a watch, and behind them, a door, half open. He took the paper gently, eyes locking on hers. "I see you," he said softly. She didn't speak, but her shoulders lowered just a little. Upstairs in the staff lounge, Crowley poured him lukewarm tea. "You seem to take particular interest in the quiet ones," she said, voice light but laced. "Quiet often means unheard," William replied, "not unworthy." She offered a tight smile. "They all have stories, some true, some convenient. Like the boy who ran?" Crowley's eyes flashed. "Lucas, was it?" he asked, watching her reaction. "He was a thief," she snapped. "Ungrateful, troublemaker from the day he arrived." "You seem very sure for someone who lost track of a child under their care." Crowley leaned forward. "I run this place without proper funding, without thanks, and certainly without pity. If you're looking for fairy tales, Mr. Sterling, you've come to the wrong doorstep." William met her eyes. "I'm not here for fairy tales," he said. "I'm here for ghosts." That night, William sat in his car across the street from Green Hollow. The sketch lay on his lap, Maddie's silent cry. He dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A judge answered. "Franklin," William said, voice low. "I need a warrant. Quiet. Fast." "You serious? There are children in there. One of them saved my life. The others might still be waiting for someone to save theirs." "You have proof?" "I have enough," William said, "and I have money. Use whichever you trust more." Inside, Maddie watched through the cracked curtain as the man's car idled in the dark. She couldn't name the feeling it gave her, but it was warm, not like fire, like safety. She drew again. This time, it was the door, wider, and the lock, broken. Meanwhile, Lucas slept behind the library, curled beneath old newspapers. His dreams were fitful. Maddie's face flickered in and out, her mouth open, finally open, but no sound came. He woke before dawn and knew he had to go back. William returned to Green Hollow with the court order in his breast pocket and the weight of something heavier in his chest. He walked into the lobby alone. Crowley stood there, hands folded. "Come to play savior again," she sneered. "No," he said, "I came to listen. Something you stopped doing a long time ago." He handed her the document. She unfolded it slowly, face blanching. "You have no right." "I have every right," William said quietly, "because I didn't turn away." A noise stirred behind him. Footsteps. Small ones. Maddie appeared, clutching a paper. She walked straight to him, slid it into his palm. It wasn't a sketch. It was a list of names, boys, girls, with dates, and red X's beside some. William read it twice, then looked at Crowley. Her face crumpled, just for a second. "I did what I had to." "No," he said. "You did what was easy." He turned to Maddie. "I'll take it from here." She nodded. Just once. And in that gesture, William saw more forgiveness than he deserved. Outside, as the sun broke across the roof, a boy approached from the alleyway. Hair wind-blown, eyes wide, shoes missing. He stopped at the gate, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't running. Lucas didn't knock. He simply stepped through the side door, just as he had 100 times before. The air inside Green Hollow was heavier tonight, thick with secrets, humming with something unspoken. He didn't come for revenge. He came for Maddie. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. He moved quietly, the way only someone who had once survived here could. Past the dining room, past the locked playroom, toward the basement stairs, where shadows always lingered longer than they should. He paused. The light under Mrs. Crowley's office door flickered. Then came the voice. "I told you," she hissed. "He was nothing. And now look. Every reporter in town wants to sniff around." Another voice answered, sharper, male. "If anyone finds out what happened to those other kids," Crowley cut him off. "They won't. Not if that girl keeps her mouth shut." Lucas's jaw clenched. He stepped away. Maddie was in the laundry room, the same corner they always hid in, knees to her chest, eyes wide but dry. She looked up when he entered, and in that small, quiet way of hers, she smiled. Not a full one, just the edge of one, like a sliver of moon in a dark sky. "I'm here," Lucas whispered. She nodded. He crouched beside her, pulling a folded coat from his bag. "We're leaving. Tonight." She hesitated. He saw it in her hands, tight fists. "What if they follow?" she mouthed, barely shaping the words. Lucas looked down. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, "They can't follow where we're going. Someone's watching now." Her eyes flicked toward the window. A black car waited across the street. Still, quiet, but watching. William sat behind the wheel, the engine off. He didn't need heat or radio. He needed stillness. He needed to believe that stillness could do something loud things couldn't. He watched the hallway light flicker through the cracked curtains. He thought of Emily again, how she once said, "Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is wait." He waited. And then, movement. Two small figures slipped through the side gate, barefoot, fast. William opened the car door slowly. Lucas stopped in the yard, Maddie behind him. They didn't run. They stared. William didn't move. He simply said, "You don't have to run anymore." Lucas didn't believe it. Not yet. But he didn't turn away either. Inside, Crowley threw open the office door. "Gone," she hissed. "They're gone." The man with her paled. "What do we lie," she snapped. "We always lie." But this time, it was too late, because another voice echoed down the hall. A uniformed officer stepped into the entryway, a folded warrant in hand, and behind him, 2 social workers and a court-appointed guardian. Crowley's eyes narrowed, but her voice cracked when she asked, "Who sent you?" The officer replied without pause, "William Sterling." Lucas sat in the back seat, still gripping Maddie's hand. She didn't let go. William didn't speak until they were far enough away that the lights of Green Hollow looked like nothing but ghosts in the rear view. Then, gently, he asked, "Would you let me help?" Lucas stared out the window. Rain tapped the glass like a second heartbeat. "I'm not a project," he said finally. "I don't need saving." William nodded slowly. "Number you, don't." Then softer, "But even the strong need someone waiting at the door." Lucas turned, just a little, and this time, he didn't look away. The house wasn't large. No grand chandelier, no echoing hallways. Just a porch with chipping white paint, a crooked mailbox, and wind chimes that sang even when there was no breeze. Lucas stood at the threshold, his fingers twitching at his sides. He could still hear the voice of the social worker saying, "This is temporary, if you want it to be. Or more, if you let it." Behind him, Maddie clutched her worn sketchbook, eyes scanning every window like they were traps. William opened the door. No fanfare, no questions, just, "Come in. It's warm." They did, slowly. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and cedar. There were books on every surface, none too precious to touch. A fire flickered in the hearth, and a kettle whistled somewhere deeper in. William motioned toward the living room. "Shoes off is fine, but I won't yell if you forget. Couch is soft. Blankets are folded there." Lucas didn't speak, but he toed off his shoes, sat down, and wrapped his arms around his knees. Maddie followed, sitting close, still silent. William brought out cocoa in chipped mugs. "My daughter used to drink hers with too many marshmallows, claimed it tasted like clouds." Lucas took the mug, but didn't drink. "Is she here?" he asked. "No," William said. "She passed away, a long time ago." Lucas didn't say sorry, and William didn't need him to. Later they had soup, the kind that didn't come from a can. There was bread, warm and torn by hand, and Maddie finally ate with both hands like she hadn't tasted real food in weeks. Lucas watched her, then looked at William. "You're not asking anything?" he said. William tilted his head. "You're not asking who we are, or what we did." William set his spoon down. "I'll learn who you are, not by forcing you to say it." Lucas nodded slowly, then whispered, "People don't keep us?" "Not for long." William said, "I'm not most people." Upstairs, there were 2 guest rooms. Lucas picked the one with the window that faced east. He didn't sleep in the bed, just curled in the corner with his coat for a blanket, as if he still expected the walls to disappear. Maddie took the smaller room. Her drawings spread over the desk like fallen leaves, quiet, full of meaning. She drew a porch with light in the window, and in front of the door, a pair of bare feet. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like toast and apples. William was at the stove, humming a tune that might have been jazz, might have been memory. Lucas hovered near the doorway. "She's drawing again," he said. William glanced over. "That's good." Lucas shifted. "She draws better when she feels safe." "Then maybe this place is working," William said gently. Lucas chewed his lip. "How do you make something safe?" William set down the spatula. "You start by keeping promises," he said. "Small ones, like hot breakfast, every morning, or saying good night, even when it's been a hard day." Lucas nodded, almost imperceptibly. Then, "What if I don't know how to stay?" William smiled. "Then we learn together." After breakfast, William drove them into town. Maddie sat between them, sketchbook in hand. Lucas stared out the window. They passed the school, the old train station, the closed-down ice cream shop. "Used to come here with my daughter," William said, pointing to the cracked mural on the wall. "She'd always pick the flavor I didn't want, then steal mine anyway." Lucas smirked. "You miss her?" he asked. "Every day." Lucas hesitated. "What was her name?" "June," William said, "like the month, but warmer." That afternoon, Lucas stood in the hallway outside Maddie's room, listening to her hum as she drew. He turned to William, who was reading by the window. "I think she wants to stay." William looked up. "And you?" Lucas didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, "I don't know yet, but it's the first place I haven't wanted to leave right away." William nodded. "Then we'll take it one sunrise at a time." That night, before bed, William placed something small on Lucas's pillow. A flashlight, not new, but working. A note beneath it read, "In case you ever feel lost again." Lucas lay awake holding it, not because he was scared, but because someone had thought about the dark before he did. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and furniture polish. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of strangers. Outside, rain gathered quietly against the courthouse steps, like it too had come to listen. Lucas sat with his hands folded tight in his lap. He wore a borrowed button-up shirt and pants a size too big. Maddie sat beside him, her small fingers clutching his sleeve, like always. On her lap, a drawing. A figure standing in the light while shadows tried to pull them back. William sat behind them, his steady presence more comforting than any verdict could be. Across the aisle, Mrs. Crowley adjusted her scarf. She still wore pearls, still smiled like nothing could touch her, but her eyes flicked around the room with something that wasn't confidence. It was calculation, fear, dressed in posture. The judge entered. Silence fell, and the trial began. They brought out records first, testimonies, financial reports, gaps in staffing logs, an entire year with no inspection reports. Then came the names. Children who never stayed long enough to form friendships. Ones who had run away. Ones whose files were suddenly lost. Ones who, like Lucas and Maddie, had fallen through every crack because no one wanted to ask why they were always so quiet. A woman took the stand, an old cook who used to work at Green Hollow. Her voice shook as she spoke. "She locked them in closets," she said, eyes on the floor. "Said it was for discipline. Said some kids needed silence beaten into them." Crowley snorted. "That woman was fired for stealing canned peaches." "She was fired," the cook replied softly, "for speaking up." When it was Lucas's turn to testify, he stood slowly, walked alone to the stand. The prosecutor asked his name. He hesitated, then said, "Lucas." "Lucas what?" He looked back at William, then down at his hands. "I don't have a last name that means anything," he said. "Not yet." A murmur rustled through the courtroom. "Do you remember Mrs. Crowley?" Lucas nodded once. "Can you tell the court what happened to you, under her care?" He looked at Maddie, then back at the judge. "I could," he said, "but I'd rather show you." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, one of Maddie's drawings. It showed a hallway, long and grey. Tiny figures curled in corners. A woman with sharp eyes and a heavy keyring. And in the very center, a boy, standing at a cracked door, 1 foot inside, 1 foot out. "This is what it felt like," Lucas said. "All the time." The silence that followed was heavier than anger. Mrs. Crowley took the stand the next day. "I ran that place alone," she said. "I did what I had to with what little I was given. You think anyone cared about those kids before I came along? They were just broken little things," she added. No manners. No future. I kept them in line. You hurt them, the prosecutor said quietly. She scoffed. I gave them rules. Lucas stood up from the bench. Not allowed. But he did anyway. The judge didn't stop him. He looked straight at Crowley. You didn't break us, he said. You just taught us what cruelty looked like in daylight. And then he sat back down. On the final day, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, social workers, strangers who had read the story and couldn't look away. The judge's voice was clear. In the matter of abuse, neglect, and systemic failure, this court finds Mrs. Judith Crowley guilty on all counts. A gasp. A stifled sob. Crowley's face didn't change until she saw Maddie's drawing placed quietly on the prosecution table. She looked at it, and for just a moment, her hands trembled. Not from guilt, from the knowledge that her name would never be said without someone remembering what she did. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Lucas stepped into the sunlight and breathed. Maddie reached for his hand. He took it. William joined them quietly, offering no words, just standing beside them as the cameras flashed. Later, when the crowd had gone, William turned to Lucas. You were brave, he said. Lucas shook his head. I was just tired of being afraid. William nodded. That's usually where courage starts. Lucas looked up at him, and for the first time said, Can I take your last name? William didn't answer with words. He just reached out, placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, and smiled. Spring came slow to Green Hollow. It didn't rush like in other towns, no sudden burst of color, no loud bird song. It crept in soft, through thawed earth and misty mornings, like a memory returning gently to a place that had once turned it away. Lucas stood beneath the elm tree in the backyard, holding a small, worn envelope in his hand. Maddie sat cross-legged nearby, sketching tulips that hadn't yet bloomed. William watched from the porch, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that still smelled faintly of firewood and something sweet. The envelope had his name on it, his new name, Lucas Sterling. He hadn't asked for it in a dramatic way. No ceremony, no big speeches. One evening, William had sat down beside him, handed over the court documents without a word. And Lucas had simply nodded. That was all. But that nod, small and quiet, felt bigger than anything he'd ever done. Now, holding that envelope, he felt his knees tremble. It's just paper, he whispered. William looked up from the porch. Some paper matters. Lucas unfolded it slowly, eyes scanning the official stamp, the signature, the words that made it real. Born again, not by blood, but by choice. That night, there was pie. Cherry. The kind William said June used to burn because she'd forget it in the oven while dancing to the radio. I don't dance, Lucas said quietly. William smiled. You don't have to. You just have to stay long enough to remember what joy feels like. Lucas didn't answer, but when William reached over and tucked the first slice on his plate, Lucas took it without flinching. Maddie finished her drawing the next morning. It showed a house with deep roots, its foundations stretching beneath the earth like the veins of a heart. But instead of a roof, the top of the house opened like wings, two wide arcs lifting toward a soft sky. She left it by Lucas's pillow. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, That's us, isn't it? She didn't speak. She just nodded. On a Sunday, William took them to the lake. It was still half frozen, but the air smelled like growing things. They sat on the dock, feet dangling above ice-glinted water. Lucas watched a bird circle high, then land in the reeds. Do you ever miss being alone? Lucas asked. William shook his head. I missed being needed, he said. Lucas looked down at the ripples. I used to think being alone meant Being strong. It's harder to stay, William replied. Harder to let people know you. Lucas's voice was barely a breath. What if they leave? William didn't hesitate. Then you love them anyway. The day before school started, Lucas packed his bag carefully. Maddie had drawn his initials on a small tag and tied it to the zipper. She handed him a folded note. He tucked it into his front pocket. You nervous? William asked. Lucas shrugged. A little. William leaned against the doorway. Want me to walk you in? Lucas paused, then said, Can you just wait here? At the gate? William smiled. Of course. The gate felt bigger than it was. Lucas walked slowly. He heard the buzz of kids, the squeak of lockers, the low chatter of teachers. He touched the folded note in his pocket, then turned. William stood by the gate, hand raised, like a steady lighthouse. Lucas exhaled and walked through. When he got home, the sun had shifted behind clouds. He climbed the stairs slowly and found Maddie in her room, adding color to her wings and roots drawing. I made a friend, he said. She looked up, surprised. She likes space and dogs, and she doesn't ask too many questions. Maddie smiled. Then she handed him a pencil. You can add something, she mouthed. Lucas hesitated. Then, in the corner of the drawing, he wrote one word. Home. That night, William pulled an old photo album from the attic. He laid it out on the table. June's face smiled up from the pages, freckled, messy-haired, always mid-laugh. Lucas traced a corner of the photo. She looks kind, he said. William's voice was quiet. She would have liked you. Lucas didn't respond, but when William stood to put the album away, Lucas said, Can we leave it out? William paused, then nodded. Spring deepened. The tulips finally bloomed. And on the mailbox out front, a new name was painted, carefully, in white. Sterling. Not just for William, but for the boy who'd once only known locked doors and cold stairs, and who now, finally, had both roots and wings. The attic was warm with dust and memory. Lucas stood in the half-light, one hand on the old cedar chest William had pointed to weeks before. It's all hers, he'd said. I haven't opened it in years, but maybe it's time. He lifted the lid gently. The scent hit him first. Lavender and old paper, like a grandmother's coat left hanging in spring. Inside were June's things, a cracked violin case, notebooks tied in string, and on top, a jar of firefly lights, long faded but still faintly glowing when shaken. Maddie climbed the attic stairs behind him. She looked over his shoulder, wide-eyed. What is it? She whispered. Lucas held up the jar, a little girl's promise not to forget. Downstairs, William sat with an envelope on his lap. Lucas handed him the violin case. She wrote music, Lucas said. There's sheet music in here, and drawings, notes about people, like she was trying to remember the world, in case it forgot her. William opened the case with trembling fingers. Inside, the strings were silent, but the bow was tucked neatly beneath a folded photo. June, maybe 8, holding the instrument like it was made of glass and stars. She wanted to be heard, William murmured. Not famous, just understood. Lucas nodded. She is. She still is. That week, Lucas didn't sleep much. He stayed up reading her journals by lamplight. Maddie curled beside him on the floor, sketching as he read aloud. The words were full of daydreams, questions, tiny moments only children notice. But there was one line he read over and over again. If I ever disappear, I hope someone looks for the light I left behind. It didn't feel like something a child wrote. It felt like a message, buried just deep enough for someone like Lucas to find. At the town library, William quietly asked about opening a small gallery. just for one weekend, just to share June's drawings, her music, her quiet hopes. The librarian, an older woman named Ruth, blinked at the name. "I remember June," she said. "She used to sit by the window in the back and hum. Said silence was too loud if you didn't fill it with something kind." Ruth offered the community room without hesitation. "No charge," she said. "Some stories are payment enough." The day of the gallery, Maddie set up a corner called What We Saved. It included Lucas's folded court papers, the drawing Maddie had made of the house with roots and wings, and the flashlight William gave them that night they first arrived. People came quietly. Some stayed only a moment. Some cried. One woman touched the sketch of the fireflies and whispered, "She lit up every room." Lucas stood near the back, not speaking. But when a young boy asked, "Who is June?" Lucas answered, "She's the reason we're here." That night, William left the back door open. Fireflies returned to the garden, blinking slowly among the tulips. Lucas stood barefoot in the grass. Maddie chased a few, laughing silently. Her sketchbook lay forgotten on the porch step. William came out holding a single sheet of paper. "Lucas," he said, "I think this is meant for you." It was a letter, not addressed, not signed, but the handwriting was unmistakably June's. "Dear whoever finds this, if you're reading, it means my light didn't go out. It means someone stayed. So maybe you will too." Lucas folded it slowly, held it to his chest, then turned to William. "We should make something. Something that lasts." William raised a brow. "Like what?" "A foundation," Lucas said. "A safe house, for kids who need a porch light left on." William smiled. "You sure?" Lucas nodded. "You gave me a name. She gave me a reason." Months later, the sign above the old green hollow building was changed. The paint was soft blue. The letters simple and firm. "The June house where every light matters," and on the wall, just inside, beside a shelf of flashlights and books and jars of glowing paper stars, a single frame held a drawing. A house with deep roots. Wings for a roof. And through its open windows, light pouring out. The wind came just after dusk, rustling through the cottonwoods behind the June house. It wasn't loud, not the kind of wind that knocks over chairs or tears laundry off lines. This one moved like breath, like memory, like someone whispering a name they hadn't spoken in years. Lucas stood on the porch alone, watching it stir the garden, Maddie's sunflowers bowing gently, the porch chimes singing just once. William was inside, fixing the loose hinge on the back door. And Lucas was holding June's last letter. He had found it inside the violin case, tucked between pages of music no one had ever heard played aloud. It wasn't addressed. Not to William, not to the world. Just to someone who stays. He unfolded it again, the paper soft from time and hands. "I don't know if anyone will read this. Maybe no one will. That's the risk, right? Loving people you may never meet. But I believe, maybe stubbornly, that someone kind will come along. Someone who doesn't laugh when things are quiet. Someone who knows how to sit with silence and not try to fill it with noise. If that's you, thank you for staying." Lucas folded it slowly. He didn't cry, but his throat tightened like it always did when he remembered the night the storm found them. And somehow, so did William. Later that evening, Maddie came out with 2 mugs of cocoa. "I saw the wind playing with the tulips," she said, sitting beside him, like it knew they missed her. Lucas looked at her. "Do you think wind remembers people?" Maddie tilted her head. "I think it remembers sounds, and smells, and goodbyes that weren't finished." He smiled. "That sounds like something she'd write." "I think she did," Maddie whispered, and handed him a folded page. one of June's poems she had copied by hand. It read, "The wind doesn't forget the small things, the slam of a door, the hum of a song, the hush between two people who stay." They planted wildflowers the next morning. Lucas found an old patch near the stone wall behind the house, where the soil was stubborn but soft underneath. Maddie chose the seeds. She liked violets, she said, and blue flax, said they looked like freckles on the earth. William helped dig the first holes. "I never got to do this with her," he said quietly. "She always planted things without asking, said if they wanted to grow, they would." Lucas placed the first seed, and for a moment, he felt it, her hand beneath his, guiding it. That night, a girl named Emily arrived. She was 10, quiet, carried one stuffed bear and no words. Lucas showed her the porch swing. Maddie left a drawing on her pillow. Emily didn't say thank you, but at bedtime she asked, "Do the lights here stay on?" Lucas knelt beside her. "Only if you want them to," he said, "but they're never far." She nodded once, and left the bear beside her head, like a soldier standing guard. A week later, Ruth the librarian brought over a donated bookshelf. Lucas helped carry it in. As they set it down, she looked around the room. Photos, drawings, words framed on the walls. "She'd be proud," Ruth said. Lucas smiled. "We're just trying to make something last." "She did," Ruth said. "She made you." On the first warm Saturday of April, they hosted a small gathering. Former residents came, neighbors, a few teachers, a man who once delivered firewood and never knew a girl had hidden drawings in the back shed while he worked. They lit paper lanterns at dusk. One by one, they wrote messages on the sides, some simple, "Thank you," some raw, "You saved me." Lucas held his lantern close, then wrote just 2 words, "Still here." He let it go and watched it rise, slow, deliberate, like it wasn't just air lifting it, but every small voice that had once felt too small. Later, when the house had gone quiet again, Lucas stood by the open window. The wind came again, softer this time, almost shy. He whispered into it, "Tell her thank you." And for a moment, he swore he heard it carry his words, and bring back just one. Stay. The story of Lucas, William, and June isn't just fiction. It's a quiet mirror held up to our lives. It reminds us that healing doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a porch light left on, a letter never mailed, or a child finally hearing, "You're safe now." We live in a world that often praises speed, noise, and visibility. But maybe the truest kind of impact is the one we'll never fully see. The impact we make just by staying, by listening, by refusing to give up on each other. June left behind a legacy not of wealth or titles, but of gentleness in a loud world. Lucas carried that light forward, and William, once lost in regret, found redemption not by erasing the past, but by choosing to love better today. Perhaps the real lesson is this: you don't have to be everything to everyone. You just have to be something kind to someone, and maybe that's enough. And what about you? Are you taking care of your heart, not just your body? Have you let yourself rest lately, not just sleep, but truly rest? Is there someone who needs your voice, your patience, your quiet presence today? Tell me, because sometimes all it takes is one question to open the door to a place called peace,